Sup YouTube, welcome to CodAffection. Today we are going to implement Firebase CRUD Operations inside a React application. Before getting into this topic, I would like to thank for your PayPal donations for my previous works. In order to make more helpful and quality tutorials like this, you can also support me through PayPal donation. I have given the link in video description and inside the first comment of the video. I have also written a blog post on this same topic. I have given the link in video description. You can grab code from there as well. So without further ado, let's get started with this topic. First of all, we have to create a React application. For that, you can use this shortcut. Instead of this folder path here, I will just replace that with cmd, then hit enter. So here we have open command prompt from the same folder directory here. In order to create a React application, you can execute this command npx create react app, and then you can provide the name of the app. It would be Firebase CRUD. Now it's gonna take a while to complete this, so please be patient. So here we have successfully created the app. As a result of that, you can see the new folder with the project name Firebase CRUD. Let's navigate inside that folder here. Now we have to open this project folder inside VS Code editor. For that, you can do this code space period symbol, hit enter. So here we have the brand new React application. Now let's run this application. For that, go to terminal, then new terminal here, then execute this command npm start. So this is how the fresh React application looks like. For this application, we'll be using Bootstrap. So first of all, let's grab corresponding style sheet and JavaScript reference into this application. So go to this website getbootstrap.com, then click on this get started here. Let's copy this CSS reference. We can paste that inside this head tag here. Now let's copy the corresponding JavaScript file also, and we can paste that just before the body end tag here. For this application, we'll be using font awesome icons. So let's grab corresponding CDN. So font awesome CDN. I will follow this link here from cdnjs.com. Then from this CSS tab here, let's copy this minified CSS reference and let's paste that along with this Bootstrap style sheet here. In this tutorial, we will be implementing Firebase CRUD operations with React. For that, we will be using contact informations like full name, email address, mobile, and address. So first of all, let's create the Firebase project. For that, first of all, go to this website here, console.firebase.google.com. Then click on this add project here. Name your project here. I will name it as React CRUD. Click on continue. I will disable Google Analytics. Create the project, click on continue. So here we are inside the project overview or the dashboard. We are going to use this Firebase project for database purpose. So first of all, let's create a database. So click on this database option here. For this application, we will be using real-time database. So click on this create database option here. Now select this test mode here, so that we can perform read and write operation without authentication. Click on enable. So here we have our real-time database. We will be storing contact informations under a node contacts. We will discuss that later. Now back to project overview here. Now we have to add connection details for this project into our React application. For that, you can select this option for web. We have to provide a nickname here. I will provide the same name, React CRUD. Register the app. So here we have the configuration object, and then we have to call this initialize app function with the configuration here. So let me copy these codes from here and then back to the application. Now let's create a new file inside this src folder here, firebase.js, and then we can just paste the code here as mentioned inside this guide here. We also have to include this script reference here, but inside our application, we'll be using npm package Firebase. Okay, so back to the application here, let's install the corresponding npm package, npm i4 install S for save, Firebase. Hit enter. It's gonna take a while, so please be patient. So here we have completed with the package installation Firebase. In order to make use of this function call here, we have to import the package Firebase here. So let's add the corresponding import statement. From Firebase package, we have to import all with this alias Firebase. Now inside this application, we have two important components. So first of all, let's create the component folder here, components. First of all, we have the parent component, contacts, and then we have the child component, contact form. Inside this application, for component creation, we'll be using React hooks. In order to create a React hook component, you can use this React snippet SFC stateless functional component. Hit enter. Name of this component will be contacts. For now, I will just keep this return statement as it is. Now let's define this contact form component here. SFC contact form. The default view of the application here, default component here, app.js. Instead of this HTMLs here, we will be using bootstrap grid system. So first of all, we will have a div with a class row. Inside that, we can use these columns. Class name is equal to call md8, and then we have an offset of one column, so offset md1. Inside this div, we can show the parent component contacts. For that, let's add the tag contacts here. Inside this auto suggestion, just select this option so that corresponding import statement will be added at the top. Now back to the parent component contacts here. First of all, we can show a title for this application. For that, I will be using bootstrap jumbotron element. So let me copy this jumbotron from here, and then let's paste that here. We don't need this para here. I will name this app as something contact register. Just beneath that, we can use the bootstrap grid system like this, div class name row, and here is the first column called md5. Inside that, we can show the form component where we have to design the form for contact informations. So contact form, select this option, corresponding import statement should be added at the top. Okay, sorry, inside these components we forgot to import React, so let's import that here. Import statement from React, we have to import React. Now let me copy this import statement and paste that inside this contact form here. Now back to this parent component. So here we have 5 columns for the contact form. The rest of the 7 columns will be used for listing inserted contact informations. So class name is equal to call md7. For now, we'll just display this div saying list of contacts. Now you can see a red squiggly line here saying JSX expression must have one parent element. Currently inside this return statement, we have 2 parent divs, one for this jumbotron here and one for this bootstrap grid system row. As per JSX syntax, inside this return statement, it will only allow one parent element. In order to fix this issue, we just need to enclose these 2 divs with React fragment. So we can do this react.fragment. Now let me move this end tag here. In short, you can do this. We can just avoid this React fragment here and here. That's it. Inside the return statement, there should be only one parent element. Here we had 2 divs as outer element. In order to fix that, we have added this React fragment. Now inside this child component contact form, we have to design a form. For now, I will just return this div saying display form. Now let me save this and back to the application here. So that's it. So here we have the title saying contact register, and inside the first bootstrap column we have to design a form, and inserter records should be listed inside the second column of the bootstrap. Now we have to make few more changes here. Let me align this text in center. So back to the parent component here, and then let's add this class text-center. Also, we have to align this whole container in center. For that, inside app.js, we have to use offset with 2 columns. Now let's look how to design the form inside this child component here. As we have mentioned, for this React components, we will be using React hooks. So let's import corresponding functions here. Use state and use effect. Basically, React hook components are functional component. With these functions, use state and use effect, we can have additional features inside this React hook components. For example, inside this application, we are going to implement CRUD operations on contact informations. So first of all, let me define a constant variable here, initial field values. It is an object. It contains initial values for each fields. First of all, we have full name as empty string, and then we have mobile, email, and address. Now let's talk about this use state function here. With this use state function, we can define state variable for a component. For example, we can define a state variable like this, var, and then here we have a tuple, state variable, for example, x, and here we have another function setX, and we just need to call this function use state here. So here we have the state variable x, and using this function setX, we can change values of this variable here. And inside this function call, we can set the default value of this state variable x. If you want to change value of this object, we just need to call the function setX with the new value something 6 or 7. That's it. In same way, we are going to define a state variable here to design the form. I will name it as values, and corresponding function will be set values. I will initialize this state variable with this object initial field values. Now let's define a form inside this component. So first of all, we have a form. In order to prevent from showing previously posted form data, we can set this property autocomplete as off. Now first of all, we have to show an input control for full name. So a div with class name, form group. Along with this full name input control, I want to show a font awesome icon. You can see the similar design inside the documentation here using input group. We will have an input control. Before that, we will have a font awesome icon. So in order to do that, we can add one more class here, input group. To show the font awesome icon, we can add this div with the class name input group prepend. Inside that, we can have another div with this class name input group text. Inside that, we can have a font awesome icon. So I tag with this class name fast, then for-user. Then outside this input group prepend, and inside this input group, we can have the input control. So input, first of all, we have to add the bootstrap class here. So class name is equal to form control, and let's set this placeholder as full name here. In order to identify each input control inside this form, we have to pass a name attribute here. I will set it as full name. Value of this input control can be set to this values state property here. Okay, inside that, we will have these properties for each control. So let's add that here, values. Inside that, we have full name. Now let me save this and back to the application here. So here we have the input control for full name. Now we have to show input control for mobile and email address in a single line. Each of these controls will take 6 columns from Bootstrap. So first of all, we can add this outer div here, form row. Since we have to divide these controls into 2 halves, we have to add this class form row. Now we can just copy this div for full name here and pasting here for mobile and email address. Okay, we can assign this class called md6 for these two divs. Call md6. Let me copy this, pasting here for email address also. Now let's update rest of the attributes here. For mobile, we'll be using a different phone awesome icon for mobile alt. Placeholder will be mobile. Name should be exactly similar to this property that we have inside this values state property here. So mobile values dot mobile. Then after that we have email address. Corresponding icon class will be for envelope. Placeholder email. Name is equal to email. Values dot email. Back to the application. That's it. Sorry, here we have an extra close tag. Let me save this. Back to the application. That's it. Now if you inspect this application, you could see this error. You provided a value props to a field without onChange handler. Since we have set values for these input controls from state variable values, we have to add onChange event also. Currently, if you enter values into these input controls, nothing will happen. In order to populate these input controls, we have to handle this onChange event. So let's add the event here. First of all, I will add that for this input control. OnChange is equal to, we'll be defining a new function called handle input change. Now let's define this function here. Constant handle input change. For this function, we have only one single parameter, which is the default event parameter for any JavaScript event. Inside this function, first of all, we have to retrieve the current value of the input control and corresponding name attribute value. Inside this default event parameter E, will have an object e.target. It contains all of the information regarding that input control from which this event is triggered. So from that, we have to retrieve name and value of the control. For that, we can use this destructive syntax. We have to retrieve name and value. Okay, so inside this variable we will have name, which is full name for this control here. Current value inside this control will be the inside this property value. Now we have to update this full name inside this state variable values. For that, we can call the function set values. If this state variable is a string or an integer, we just need to pass the new value right away, something 45 or 50. In this case, we have an object. So we just need to update the corresponding property full name here. For that, we can do this. We will pass an object. First of all, we will use the existing values as it is. So we can use this separator operator here. So values. And then we just need to update this property full name. Full name is equal to new value, which is the inside this property value. So this function will handle onChange event for full name control only. In order to use this function generally for any input control, instead of hard coding full name here, we can use this syntax. We just need to enclose this name property with square brackets. So that corresponding value property will be assigned with this value here. Since we have set name attribute of any input control inside this form, exactly similar to these properties inside this state variable here. So corresponding property will be updated. Now let's fire up same function for rest of the input control onChange event. Let me copy this and pasting for mobile and email address. Here we forgot to add one more input control for address. So let's add that here. Div class name is equal to form group. Inside that we can have this text area. Now let me copy these attributes from email and pasting here for address. Placeholder will be address. Name will be address. Let me copy these attributes also values.address. Finally, let's add a submit button. So div with class name form control, input type is equal to submit, value is equal to save, class name is equal to tn, btn primary. In order to enlarge this button, we can add this class btn block. So instead of form control, we have to use form group. Let me save this. Back to the application. I think we have added this address and submit button inside this form row. Let's move that outside. Back to the application. That's it. Since we have implemented onChange event, we can add values inside these input controls. Corresponding values will be updated into respective properties inside state object values. Now let's look how we can submit this form so that we can insert a new document into the Firebase DB. For that, we have to add the onSubmit event. OnSubmit, we will handle that inside this function handle form submit. Let's define this function here. It has a single parameter event. In order to prevent default procedures while submitting a form like refreshing of the page, we can call this function prevent default. Now we can insert a new record containing details of these input controls here into Firebase DB. All of the Firebase related operations can be done inside this parent component here. So I'll be defining a function here, constant add or edit. It is a function with single parameter object. We can define this function in a bit. For now, we are inside the parent component. We have to call this function add or edit inside this child component after this function call here. For that, we can do this. We'll just pass that here like this. Add or edit is equal to add or edit function. Okay, now we can access this function inside this child component through its props. Now we can add props. Through this props parameter, we can access data passed from parent components. Now we just need to do this props dot add or edit. Into this function, we can pass values of these input controls here that is saved inside this state values here. So we can pass values here. Now let's complete this function add or edit here. Before defining this function, inside this firebase.js function, we have initialized this app with the configuration. So here we have called this function initialize app with the configuration. It will return an object. Now let me save that object in a variable firedb. We need this object to make reference into our Firebase DB. And finally, from this file, we are going to export the reference. For that, we can do this firedb.database function can be called. And finally, we need to call this reference. So from this file, we have exported the database reference. Now we can import this file inside this parent component here so that we can do CRUD operations inside the DB. So import statement from firebase.js file, we have to import this exported reference as Firebase DB here, Firebase DB. Now inside this add or edit function, let's look how we can insert a new record. For that, we can do this firebase.child function can be called, and here we have to pass the path or the node into which we want to insert the document. So contacts, there will be a new node created. Currently inside the Firebase DB, there is no such node with this name contacts. To insert a new record under this node, we can call this function push, and we just need to pass the object here, obj. It contains all of the information from our form controls. And here we can pass a callback function like this. If there is any error, we can print that inside the console. So we can do this console.log error. Let me save all of these modifications. Now let's try to insert a new record. Full name, Fiona Green, mobile number, email fiona@gmail.com, and then some address. Submit the form. Now let's inspect whether we have any error or not. Now let's look whether it is inserted into the Firebase DB or not. Currently we are inside the project overview. Click on database here. Boom, that's it. So under this contacts node here, you could see a new document here, address, email, full name, and mobile. For each of the documents under this contacts node here, we can identify all of them uniquely with this key here. Now let's look how we can list all of the documents under this contacts node inside this second half here. Now inside this component, when would be the proper time to retrieve all of the records from our Firebase DB? If we were using class-based components, we may do that inside component did mount. But in case of React hooks, we have to do something different. First of all, let's import corresponding functions here, like we have done inside this child component. Use state and use effect. Let me copy this and paste in here. As you know, we can define component state property using this function use state. For example, we can define a state property x with the corresponding set function set x is equal to use state, let it be 0 initially, and with this use effect function we can define side effects or callback functions when there is a change inside this value. Use effect function can be called. Basically it has a callback function like this. As a second parameter, we can have this array. Inside that we can have this state variable x. If there is any change inside this state variable x, this callback function will be invoked. So this is the main use of use effect function. If you want an alternative like component did mount, as a second parameter, we just need to pass an empty array like this. So this is similar to component did mount, okay? Inside this callback function here, we can retrieve all of the records from our Firebase DB here under this node contacts. For that, we can do this. First of all, let me copy this reference, and then we just need to subscribe to that using this function on. Whenever there is a change of value inside this node contacts, we can define a callback function like this, snapshot. This callback function will be invoked whenever insert, update, or delete operation occurs under this contacts node. Now we can access all of the documents under this contacts node like this. We just need to call the function val from snapshot. Now let's define a component state property to store all of the documents. I will define the state variable contact objects. Now let's rename this set function accordingly. Set contact objects. Initially it would be an empty object. So this function will return a collection of objects. For your convenience, if you want, you can convert that into an array of objects. In order to avoid the extra work, I'm going to use as it is. So first of all, we will check whether the list is null or not. If it is not null, we have to update the state variable. For that, we can call this function set contacts objects. Inside that, we can use this separator, and let's call the same function here. Now inside the second half here, we can render all of the objects inside a table. Class name is equal to table, then table borderless, then table stripped. Inside that, we can have this t-head. Class name is equal to t-head light. Now let's add a tr element. First of all, we have full name. Now let me duplicate this 3 times. For that, you can use this shortcut Ctrl C, Ctrl V. This is for mobile, email, and inside the last column we can have buttons for delete and edit operations. And here we have the T body. Inside the T body, we have to have tr element for each of the objects inside this collection contact objects. So we can do that inside this pair of curly brace. If we were using an array, we can directly call the map function to loop through the records. But in case of collection, first of all, we have to loop through the keys of the collection. So we can call this object.keys function. Inside that we can pass the collection contact objects. So this function object keys returns all of the keys from the object collection. So basically the collection includes documents like this. For each of the documents, key of the object will be this unique identifier. So from this keys function, as we have mentioned, it will return an array. So now we can call this map function. We have a single parameter key, or you can call ID. Inside this function, we just need to return a tr element containing td cell for each of the objects. So first of all, we have full name, so td. Now let's add a pair of curly brace. Now we have to access the particular document from this collection with this ID. For that, we can do this contact objects. Here we can pass the ID dot full name. Now let me copy this and pasting here 2 times. This is for mobile. And finally we have email. And finally we need a TD cell for action buttons, edit and delete. We can do that later. For now I will keep it as empty. Now let me save this, back to the application, reload this. You could see a small delay there because we are fetching data from this database collection here. At the same time, you could see an error here. Each child in a list should have a unique key prop, meaning when we are trying to render a list of records like this, here we are trying to render a list of tr elements. In that case, the outer element should have an attribute key, and here we have to pass a unique value for each of the records. In this case, we can directly pass this ID. Now let me save this back to the app. That's it. Now error is gone. Now let's look how we can implement update or edit operation. For that, first of all, we can add an edit icon for each of the records here. Inside this last TD cell, we can add an anchor element. Let's apply a few classes. btn, then btn-primary. Inside that, we have to show a font over some icon. For that, I will add this I tag. Class name is equal to fast, then far pencil alt. Now let me copy this and pasting here for delete operation. Instead of this class, we have to use text primary and that of delete button here, text danger. Let's change this font over some class also. Now back to the application. Here you can see the icons for edit and delete operation. Now if user want to update a record, he can click on this pencil icon here. Corresponding document details should be populated inside these respective form controls here. In order to do that, inside this parent component, I'm going to create a new state variable to hold current ID of the record. Using this property, we can identify which record is open for edit operation. So let's define the variable here, current ID, and set current ID is equal to use state function can be called. Inside that, we can have this default value empty string. Now inside this button click event, we can update selected record ID. For that, let's add the on click event here. On click is equal to, we just need to update this state variable current ID that we can do inside this on click event inline. So first of all, let me define an anonymous function here. Now we can call this function set current ID. Into that, we can pass the ID of this selected document that can be accessed from this parameter ID. Corresponding ID will be saved into the state variable current ID. At the same time, we have to populate these input controls with respective informations. In order to populate selected record details inside this form, we have to pass the selected ID, which is the state variable current ID, and the list of these objects. So let's pass that here. Instead of passing this like an attribute, we can do this Okay, first of all, I'll be using this separator, and then inside that we can have this object add or edit, and into that we are going to pass add or edit. Since this is an object, we can use this short syntax. Both key and value are same, so we just need to pass add or edit here. Along with that, we have to pass the current ID and then finally contact objects. Now inside this child component, we can access all of those parent properties through these props here, like we have access this add or edit. We have to populate this form when user changes parent component state property current ID. So I'm going to call the function useEffect here, like we have used useEffect inside the parent component. So we can call the function useEffect here. useEffect. First of all, we will have this callback function, and it should be called whenever the parent component state property current ID is changed or contact objects is changed. Okay, so this function will be invoked whenever there is a change inside these state properties, current ID and contact objects. First of all, we will have this if clause. Inside that, we can check props.currentID if it is equal to an empty string. If current ID is empty string, meaning there is no item selected for edit operation, in that case we have to reset this values state property here. So we can do this set values. Inside that, we just need to pass this initial field values here. For this form reset operation, we just need to set the current ID as empty string from parent component. If there is a value inside the current ID, we have to populate corresponding record details inside the values here. So let me copy this and pasting here. Here we have to populate corresponding record details from this contact objects. So let me copy this and pasting here. Inside this collection, we will have a record with this current ID. So corresponding ID details will be populated inside this state variable here, and thereby this form will be populated. Now let me save this and back to the application here. Now click on edit icon here. Boom. So here we have populated corresponding details into this form. For update operation, I want to change this button, submit button text to update. So let's look how we can do that conditionally. Here we have the submit button. Since we are going to handle this text inside JavaScript code, we can use this curly brace pair. Here we will check the value of current ID. So props.currentID, if it is equal to empty string, we can have this text save. Otherwise, it will be update. Let's check that here. That's it. Now after making required changes inside this form, user can submit this form for update operation. We have already implemented insert operation inside this form submit event. Now we have to implement update operation also. So back to the form submit event here. Here we have called the parent function add or edit. So first of all, we have to check the current ID. If current ID is equal to empty string, we can do the insert operation as we have done here. Inside this else part, we have to do the update operation. Now let me copy this and pasting here. For update operation, instead of push function, we have to call the set function, and then we have to concat the ID inside this path here. Okay, instead of single quotes, we can use backticks so that we can use this string interpolation here. We just need to do this $simple, then a pair of curly brace. Inside that, we can have this current ID. We have to update the details inside this path with this object. If there is any error, we will print that inside the console. Otherwise, we have to reset the form. For that, we just need to set the current ID as null. Set current ID to empty string, not null. We have to do the same inside this insert operation also. As we have defined this useEffect function inside this child component here, whenever there is a change of value inside current ID or contact object collection, this callback function will be called. Based on current ID, we will populate the form. If it is empty string, we will reset the form. Otherwise, we will populate the corresponding record details. Now back to the application. Let's try to update this record here. Update, boom, that's it. If we make any changes from this application side, it will be synchronized inside this node here. If there is any change done inside this database directly, it will be updated inside this application also. Now let's check that with this edit button here. So here we have updated address. At this same moment, if any user makes changes inside this database directly or using other applications, the same changes can be seen inside this application also. So that's all about insert and update operation. Now let's look how we can implement delete operation. I'm going to add on-click event for this delete button here. On-click. We will call this function on delete. Into this function, we have to pass the ID, so key. When we call a function by passing a parameter, we have to call that inside another function like we have done here. So let's enclose this function call inside another anonymous function here. So that's it. So let's define this function here on delete with this parameter key. For delete operation, first of all, we have to confirm this operation. So we can call this function confirm. Inside that, we can ask this query, are you sure to delete this record? If user confirm this operation, we can go for delete operation. For that, I will be just copying this function called for update operation. Instead of this set function, we just need to call remove. Here we have passed the node path, which is to be deleted. So we don't need this first object parameter here. And here is the callback function. Sorry, here we have an error. Instead of ID, we have key. Let me save this. Back to the application here. Unexpected use of confirm. We have to call this function from window. Okay, window.confirm. Now let me insert a new record. Save. So here we have the corresponding record. Now let's update this. Update. That's it. Now let's delete this record. Are you sure to delete this record? Confirm the operation. Something went wrong. Let's inspect that here. Sorry, instead of current ID, we have to pass key here. Save. Back to the application. We have made one major mistake. Previously, we have called the remove function. Instead of key, we were using current ID. At that time, it was an empty string. So we have just deleted the entire node contacts. Okay, that you can see here. We can't see the node anymore. Now let's insert the record again. Save. Delete this record. Click on OK. You could see that we have deleted the record from this Firebase here, but we have not refreshed this table here. It's because of this subscription here. If the value is not null, then only we have updated this state collection of objects, contact objects here. Inside this else part, we have to update that with empty object. So let me copy this and pasting that here. Now it should work even if there is no record inside the collection. This table will be refreshed after deleting the final record also. So that's it guys, we have completed with Firebase CRUD operations inside React. I have also written a blog post on this same topic. You can grab code from there as well. If you found this video helpful, please thumbs up this video, and for more awesome videos like this, please be subscribed to this channel CodAffection. Please like and share this video with your friends and colleagues so that they can benefit from this. Have a nice day. Bye.